November 1963. A Greyhound bus pulled into Harlem's Port Authority terminal. Among the passengers stepping onto the cold New York pavement was a man who'd been gone for 11 years. Bumpy Johnson, the godfather of Harlem, the most feared gangster who ever controlled the streets uptown. He was 56 years old now. His hair had turned gray during his time in Alcatraz. His face showed the hard lines of a decade spent in America's most brutal prison. But his eyes, those eyes still burned with the same intensity that had made him a legend. Word spread through Harlem like wildfire. Bumpy's back. Bumpy's home. But there was one man in Harlem who wasn't celebrating. One man who'd grown rich and powerful while Bumpy rotted in a cell. The man who'd betrayed him. The man who thought 11 years was long enough for people to forget. He was wrong. What Bumpy Johnson did in his first week back in Harlem would become the most talked about act of revenge in gangster history. Not with violence, not with guns, but with something far more devastating. Before we reveal how Bumpy destroyed the man who betrayed him, hit that like button and subscribe. This is a true story of loyalty, betrayal, and justice served cold. Drop a comment. Have you heard of Bumpy Johnson before? The legend of Bumpy Johnson. To understand what happened, you need to know who Bumpy Johnson was. Born Ellsworth Raymond Johnson in South Carolina in 1905, he'd come to Harlem during the Great Migration. By the 1930s, he'd become the right-hand man to Stephanie St. Clair, the legendary Queen of Numbers, who ran Harlem's gambling operations. Bumpy wasn't just muscle. He was smart, strategic. He understood that real power came from respect, not just fear. He protected the community. When Italian mobsters tried to take over Harlem's numbers racket, Bumpy fought back. When corrupt cops shook down black businesses, Bumpy made sure they regretted it. By the 1950s, Bumpy Johnson controlled Harlem. Not through terror, but through a code. He didn't allow drug dealing in his territory, at least not hard drugs. He kept violence away from families. He made sure local businesses could operate without constant extortion. Old-timers in Harlem still talk about how safe the streets were when Bumpy was in charge. He was like a mayor, one elderly resident recalled years later. If you had a problem, you went to Bumpy. If someone disrespected you, Bumpy handled it. He took care of his people. But in 1952, everything changed. Federal agents had been watching Bumpy for years, unable to pin anything major on him. Then they got their chance, a drug conspiracy charge. Despite Bumpy's policy against heroin, some of his associates had been dealing behind his back. The government used that connection to send him away. Bumpy was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He served the first part of his sentence at various facilities before being transferred to the most infamous prison in America, Alcatraz. The betrayal. Before Bumpy went to prison, he'd trusted his operations to his lieutenant, a man we'll call Marcus Williams. Marcus had been with Bumpy for 8 years. They'd grown up on the same streets. Marcus had sworn loyalty, had taken an oath to protect Bumpy's interests while he was away. Watch over things. Bumpy had told Marcus the day before surrendering to federal custody. Keep the streets clean. Take care of the widows and the families. Don't let the Italians move in. Can you do that? Marcus had looked Bumpy in the eyes and said, "With my life, Bump. You have my word." It was a lie. Within 6 months of Bumpy being locked up, Marcus started making changes. Small ones at first. He kept a bigger cut of the profits. He started allowing heroin dealers to operate in certain blocks. For a price. He partnered with the same Italian mobsters Bumpy had spent decades fighting against. By year 2, Marcus was living in a brownstone that rivaled any on Sugar Hill. He wore expensive suits, drove a Cadillac, dated movie stars when they came through New York. He was everything Bumpy had been, but without the code, without the honor. The old guard in Harlem noticed. "This ain't right," they whispered. "Marcus is disrespecting Bumpy's legacy." But what could they do? Marcus had the muscle now. He had the connections. And Bumpy was locked away on an island in San Francisco Bay, surrounded by some of the most dangerous criminals in America. Life in Alcatraz. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison. It was psychological warfare. The island sat in the middle of San Francisco Bay, close enough to see the city lights at night, but impossibly far from freedom. The water was so cold and the currents so strong that escape was considered impossible. Bumpy Johnson arrived at Alcatraz in 1954. He was put in a cell that measured 5 feet by 9 feet. A bed, a toilet, a sink. That was it. Silence was enforced. prisoners couldn't talk to each other without permission. The guards were chosen for their hardness, their inability to be corrupted or sympathetic. But Bumpy wasn't like other prisoners. He'd learned long ago how to survive in harsh environments. He followed the rules, mostly. He kept his head down. He read constantly, educating himself, keeping his mind sharp. He exercised every day, maintaining his strength despite the terrible food and monotonous routine. And he thought about Harlem, about his wife Mamie waiting for him, about the streets he'd protected, and about Marcus. Letters came from friends in Harlem. Not directly, that would have been too obvious. But through Mamie, through coded messages in seemingly innocent correspondence. The letters told him everything. How Marcus had taken over. How the drugs were flowing freely now. How the Italian mob had their hooks in Harlem's operations. How Marcus was living like a king on Bumpy's legacy. One letter hit particularly hard. It came in 1957, 5 years into his sentence. An old friend named Junie Bird had written to Mamie, and she'd passed the message along. Tell Bump that Marcus is calling himself the new godfather of Harlem. Says Bumpy's time is over. Says things are better now, more profitable. Thought Bump should know. Bumpy sat in his cell that night, reading the letter over and over. Other prisoners might have raged. Might have gotten into fights, ended up in solitary confinement. But Bumpy just smiled. A cold, calculating smile. Marcus wants to be me, he thought. But he doesn't understand what made me who I am. Power without honor is just tyranny. And tyranny never lasts. The long game. For the next 6 years, Bumpy played the model prisoner. He avoided trouble. Helped the guards when younger, more volatile inmates got out of line. He became a stabilizing presence in one of America's most unstable environments. But he was also planning. Every letter from Harlem, every piece of information about Marcus's operations, every detail about who was still loyal and who had turned, Bumpy absorbed it all. He was building a mental map of how Harlem had changed, and more importantly, how he would take it back. In 1962, Bumpy was transferred out of Alcatraz. The island prison was becoming too expensive to maintain, and he'd served enough time there. He spent his last year in a federal facility in Pennsylvania, one with less strict conditions. He could receive more visitors now, talk more freely. Mamie came to see him every month. "Are you okay, Bump?" she'd ask, worried about what 11 years in prison had done to him. "I'm fine, baby," he'd tell her. "I've just been thinking, learning patience. And when I get home, things are going to be different." "What are you going to do about Marcus?" Bumpy smiled that cold smile again. "Nothing violent. Those days are past me. But Marcus needs to understand that betrayal has consequences. Harlem needs to remember what real leadership looks like." The return. When Bumpy Johnson stepped off that Greyhound bus in November 1963, Harlem was a different place. The neighborhood had changed. Urban renewal projects were tearing down old buildings. The civil rights movement was reaching a fever pitch. Malcolm X was preaching at the mosque on 116th Street. The whole world was shifting. But some things hadn't changed. The numbers racket was still running. The speakeasies and clubs still operated. And Marcus Williams still controlled it all. Bumpy didn't announce his return with fanfare. No parades, no public statements. He went home to his apartment on 147th Street, where Mamie was waiting. They held each other for a long time, not speaking. 11 years was a lifetime. "Welcome home, Ellsworth," she whispered, using his real name. "Good to be home, baby." That night, Bumpy sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring out the window at Harlem's lights. Mamie watched him carefully. "What are you thinking about?" "Marcus. What are you going to do?" Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to remind Harlem what real power looks like. Not the fake kind Marcus has been using. The real kind. The kind that comes from respect and fear in equal measure." The first move, gathering intelligence. For the first 3 days after his return, Bumpy didn't leave the apartment. He received visitors, though. Old friends from before his imprisonment came by one. They came through the back entrance, careful not to be seen. Each one brought information. Junie Bird came first. He was 70 now, too old for the game, but his memory was sharp. "Marcus has got about 40 soldiers working for him," Junie reported. "Most of them are young kids who never knew you. They think Marcus is what power looks like. He's got protection from the Genovese family. He pays them 30% of everything. The cops on his payroll get another 20%. He's keeping maybe 50% for himself and his top guys." Bumpy listened without interrupting. The heroin is everywhere now, Bump. I know you hated that stuff, but it's taken over. Marcus has dealers on every corner from 110th to 145th Street. He's making more money than you ever did, but the neighborhood is suffering. We got kids as young as 13 addicted. Families falling apart. It ain't right. No, Bumpy agreed quietly. It ain't. More visitors came. Each one painted a fuller picture. Marcus lived in a mansion now, way up on Edgecombe Avenue. He had bodyguards everywhere he went. He rode in a bulletproof Cadillac. He'd gotten paranoid, especially in the last year, as word spread that Bumpy's release was coming soon. But paranoia had made Marcus sloppy in other ways. He'd alienated some of his top lieutenants by keeping too much profit for himself. He'd disrespected some of the older community leaders. He'd forgotten that power in Harlem didn't just come from guns and money. It came from the people's respect. Marcus has made himself rich, one visitor told Bumpy. But he hasn't made Harlem better. That's the difference between him and you. The second move, showing his face. On the fourth day, Bumpy finally left his apartment. He dressed simply, a dark suit, nothing flashy. No jewelry, no expensive accessories. He walked out onto 147th Street at 10 a.m., when the neighborhood was awake and active. The reaction was immediate. People stopped and stared. Is that Bumpy Johnson? Bumpy's back. Mr. Johnson. Welcome home. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered. Older residents who remembered him from before his imprisonment rushed over to shake his hand. Women hugged him. Men wanted to talk, to tell him what had happened while he was gone. Bumpy was gracious with everyone. He asked about their families. Remembered names and faces from over a decade ago. He asked about businesses, about the neighborhood, about problems people were facing. This was intentional. Bumpy was showing Harlem that he was back, yes, but more importantly, that he still cared. That he still saw them as people, not just sources of revenue. Word spread fast. By noon, Marcus Williams knew Bumpy was out and walking the streets. His response was swift and predictable. The confrontation. Marcus sent 5 of his soldiers to find Bumpy that afternoon. They caught up with him outside the Red Rooster restaurant on 138th Street. Bumpy was alone, intentionally. No bodyguards, no weapons visible. The leader of Marcus's crew was a young man named Dion, maybe 25 years old. He stepped in front of Bumpy, trying to look tough. Mr. Johnson, Marcus wants to see you. Bumpy looked at him calmly. Does he now? Yeah. He says you need to come talk to him. About how things are going to work now that you're back. A small crowd was gathering, watching this confrontation. People knew what this meant. Marcus was making a power play, trying to show that he was still in charge. Bumpy smiled slightly. Tell Marcus I'll see him when I'm ready. Right now, I'm visiting my neighborhood. I've been gone a long time. I want to see what's changed. Dion's hand moved toward his waistband, where a gun was presumably tucked. Marcus said. I heard what Marcus said, Bumpy interrupted, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel now. And I'm telling you what I'm going to do. Now you have 2 choices, son. You can walk away and deliver my message. Or you can try to make something happen here on this street, in front of all these witnesses, in broad daylight. Which choice do you think is smarter? Dion hesitated. He'd been told Bumpy was old now, washed up, not a threat. But the man standing in front of him didn't look washed up. He looked dangerous in a way Dion had never encountered before. Not because of physical intimidation, but because of absolute confidence. One of the older men in the crowd called out, Leave Mr. Johnson alone, Dion. Show some respect. Another voice. This ain't right, coming at him like this. Dion realized he was losing the crowd. In Harlem, public opinion mattered. He stepped back. I'll tell Marcus what you said. You do that, Bumpy replied. And Dion? Tell him I'll come see him in 3 days. That'll give him time to think about some things. The psychological game. Those 3 days were crucial. Bumpy didn't hide. He walked around Harlem every day, visiting old haunts, talking to people. He went to the barbershop where he used to get his hair cut. Had lunch at small restaurants. Stopped by the Apollo Theater. Everywhere he went, he listened more than he talked. People told him about the problems in the neighborhood. The drug epidemic. The violence. The corruption. The way Marcus had let outside forces take control of what Bumpy had spent decades protecting. It ain't your Harlem anymore, Mr. Johnson, one older woman told him sadly. Marcus turned it into something ugly. Then we'll have to make it beautiful again, Bumpy replied. But he was also sending a message to Marcus. By walking around unprotected, by being visible and calm, Bumpy was showing that he wasn't afraid. More importantly, he was showing Harlem that the old way, Bumpy's way, was better than Marcus's paranoid, violent approach. Marcus, meanwhile, was spiraling. His soldiers reported that people were talking about Bumpy everywhere, comparing the two men, saying things like Marcus wouldn't last 5 minutes in Alcatraz, and Bumpy never needed 20 bodyguards to feel safe. The comparison was killing Marcus's reputation. And in the gangster world, reputation was everything. The meeting. On the third day, as promised, Bumpy went to see Marcus. He went alone, walking up to the mansion on Edgecombe Avenue like he was visiting an old friend. Marcus's guards were everywhere, nervous and trigger-happy. Bumpy walked past all of them without concern. "Tell Marcus that Bumpy Johnson is here to see him." Marcus received him in a lavish office, sitting behind a massive mahogany desk. The room was filled with expensive artwork and furniture. Everything designed to impress, to intimidate. Bumpy looked around and almost laughed. This wasn't power. This was insecurity. "Bumpy," Marcus said, trying to sound confident. "Long time." 11 years, Bumpy replied, sitting down without being invited. 11 years, Marcus. That's a long time to think about loyalty and betrayal. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Bump, things changed while you were gone. The game changed. I had to adapt." "You had to adapt?" Bumpy's voice was quiet but sharp. "By selling heroin to kids? By partnering with the same Italians we spent decades keeping out of Harlem? By living in this palace while the neighborhood falls apart? I kept things running." Marcus shot back. "You were gone, Bump. Somebody had to take over." "Take over, yes. But not betray everything I built." The two men stared at each other across the desk. Marcus's guards stood around the room, hands near their weapons. Bumpy sat relaxed, like he was discussing the weather. The devastating truth. "You want to know what I learned in Alcatraz, Marcus?" Bumpy asked. "I learned patience. I learned to think long-term. And I learned that reputation is the only thing that matters in our world." "My reputation is solid," Marcus said defensively. Bumpy smiled. "Is it? Let me tell you what I've heard in the last 3 days. People are scared of you, Marcus. But they don't respect you. They pay you because they have to, not because they want to. The old guard thinks you're a disgrace. The young ones think you're just another boss who'll eventually fall." "That's not true." "It is true," Bumpy interrupted. "And here's what else is true. You've been taking 50% of everything. 50%, Marcus. When I ran things, I took 20%. 20% was enough because I understood something you never learned. If you take care of the neighborhood takes care of you." Marcus was sweating now. "What do you want, Bumpy? You want me to just hand everything back to you? After 11 years, you think you can just walk back in and take over?" "I don't want to take anything," Bumpy said calmly. "I'm going to give you a choice. The choice that stunned Harlem." Bumpy leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You're going to retire. Voluntarily. You're going to announce that you're stepping down, and you're going to leave Harlem." Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "And if I don't, then I'm going to tell everyone the truth about why I really went to prison." Marcus's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "You know what I'm talking about," Bumpy said softly. "The drug operation that got me sent away? The one I supposedly knew about, but claimed I didn't? I protected you, Marcus. Those were your drugs, your operation. I took the fall for you because you swore you'd take care of things while I was gone. I had the proof destroyed. I told the feds the operation was mine." The room went completely silent. Marcus's guards looked at each other, confused. This was news to them. "I protected you," Bumpy continued, "because I thought loyalty meant something. But you betrayed me anyway. So now I'm going to give you a choice. Walk away with your money and your life. Or I'll tell everyone the truth, that you're not just a betrayer, you're a coward who let another man go to prison for your crimes." Marcus was shaking now. "Nobody will believe you. Won't they?" Bumpy smiled. "Marcus, I spent 11 years in Alcatraz. One of the hardest prisons in America. I came back still standing, still respected. You couldn't last 11 days in a place like that. Who do you think Harlem will believe? The man who went to prison with dignity, or the man who got rich while someone else suffered?" The collapse. What Bumpy was doing was more devastating than any violence. He was destroying Marcus's reputation. In the gangster world, being revealed as a coward and a snitch was worse than death. Marcus could survive a gang war. He couldn't survive losing respect. "You have 24 hours, Bumpy said, standing up. "Announce your retirement. Say you're leaving the game to enjoy your money." Move away from New York. If you do that, I'll keep your secret. You can live out your life in peace. But if you try to fight me, if you try to hold on to power, I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are." Marcus sat frozen behind his desk. "This isn't right, Bump. I ran things for 11 years. With my money, my connections, my reputation," Bumpy corrected. "Everything you had came from me. And instead of honoring that, you betrayed it. So yes, Marcus, this is exactly right. This is justice." Bumpy walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Marcus? If anything happens to me in the next 24 hours, I've got letters ready to be delivered to every major player in Harlem. Letters explaining everything. So don't get any ideas about having me killed. It won't save you." He walked out, past the confused and nervous guards, out into the Harlem afternoon. The announcement. The next morning, Marcus Williams called a meeting with his top lieutenants. Word spread quickly through Harlem's underground. Something big was about to happen. Marcus looked terrible, like he hadn't slept all night. In a voice that shook slightly, he announced his retirement. "I've been in the game a long time," he said. "Made a lot of money. It's time for me to enjoy it. I'm stepping down, effective immediately." His lieutenants were shocked. "What about Bumpy?" one of them asked. "Is this because of him?" Marcus couldn't meet their eyes. "This is my decision. I'm done." Within hours, he'd packed his things and left New York. He moved to Philadelphia, then later to Miami. He lived out his life in comfortable obscurity, but he never returned to Harlem. The neighborhood he'd controlled for 11 years was done with him. Bumpy's return to power. Bumpy Johnson didn't seize power with violence or intimidation. He simply stepped back into his old role, and Harlem welcomed him. The old networks that had been waiting for his return activated immediately. Within a week, he'd reorganized the numbers racket, kicked out the most egregious heroin dealers, and re-established the code that had made his reign respected. He couldn't turn back all the changes. The world had moved on, and Harlem with it. But he could restore some dignity, some order. He used his reputation and wisdom to mediate disputes, to keep violence down, to make sure the community wasn't just exploited. "Mr. Johnson," people would say when they saw him on the street, "it's good to have you back." He was older now, and he knew his time was limited. He would pass away just a few years later, in 1968. But in those final years, he reminded Harlem what real leadership looked like. The lesson of revenge. What Bumpy Johnson did to Marcus Williams wasn't traditional revenge. There were no shootings, no beatings, no dramatic violence. Instead, Bumpy used something more powerful: truth and reputation. He understood that in their world, how people perceived you was everything. By revealing Marcus as a coward and a betrayer, or threatening to, Bumpy destroyed him more completely than any bullet could have. This story teaches us several profound lessons. First, true power comes from respect, not fear. Marcus ruled through intimidation and violence. People obeyed him because they were scared. But when Bumpy returned, people chose him because they respected him. Respect is more powerful and more lasting than fear. Second, betrayal always has consequences. Marcus thought 11 years was enough time for people to forget, for Bumpy to give up, for the past to stay buried. But betrayal doesn't have an expiration date. The people you wrong have long memories, and eventually, there will be a reckoning. Third, patience is the greatest weapon. Bumpy spent 11 years in one of America's hardest prisons. He could have become bitter and violent. Instead, he waited, planned, and when the time came, he executed perfect psychological warfare. His patience made his revenge more devastating. Fourth, reputation is everything. Marcus had money, power, and soldiers. But when Bumpy threatened to reveal the truth about his character, all of that crumbled. Because in any community, your reputation determines your real power. Money can be taken. Soldiers can be bought. But reputation, once destroyed, can never be rebuilt. The price of betrayal. Marcus Williams lived another 30 years after leaving Harlem, dying in obscurity in the 1990s. He had his money. He had his life. But he lost everything that mattered: his reputation, his respect, his place in history. Today, when people talk about Harlem's golden age, they talk about Bumpy Johnson. They talk about the godfather who protected his neighborhood, who had a code, who understood that with power comes responsibility. Marcus Williams is barely a footnote, remembered only as the man who betrayed a legend. Bumpy Johnson, meanwhile, became more legendary after his death than he'd been in life. Books were written about him. Movies featured characters based on him. The TV show Godfather of Harlem immortalized his story for a new generation. The lesson is clear. You can steal someone's position, their money, their territory. But you can't steal their legacy. Legacy is earned through character, through how you treat people, through the principles you live by. Marcus tried to steal Bumpy's legacy, and in the end, he lost everything, including his own. The final truth. Bumpy Johnson's story isn't really about gangsters or crime. It's about integrity in a world without rules. It's about staying true to your principles, even when it costs you everything. It's about understanding that real power doesn't come from what you take, but from what you give and how you treat people. When Bumpy returned from Alcatraz, he could have started a war. He had friends who would have fought for him. He could have had Marcus killed within 24 hours. But instead, he chose a different path, one that required more courage and more wisdom. He showed Harlem that justice doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like an old man calmly explaining to a betrayer exactly why he's already lost. Sometimes it looks like giving someone a choice between dignity and destruction. Sometimes it looks like walking away from revenge because you know the truth will destroy them more completely than you ever could. If this story taught you something about loyalty, patience, and real power, smash that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that betrayal always catches up with you. Comment below. What would you have done in Bumpy's position? Remember, true power isn't about how much you can take from others. It's about how much respect you earn through your actions. Marcus Williams forgot that lesson and lost everything. Bumpy Johnson never forgot and became a legend. The greatest revenge isn't violence. It's living well, staying true to your principles, and letting your character speak louder than your enemy's lies. That's the legacy of Bumpy Johnson, the godfather who came back from Alcatraz and reminded Harlem what real leadership looked like. Rest in power, Bumpy Johnson. Your story still teaches us that integrity, patience, and wisdom will always defeat betrayal, greed, and cowardice.